Today is the second week of a three-part series where we have been talking about the theme for this year, which is also the theme of our summit, Our Love is Power. Stand up, speak up, show up. And last week we talked about that love is the entry point, and being able to love ourselves and really being able to hold love for ourselves and for others is the place where we begin. But today we focus on the our, O-U-R, that our love, what it means to be a part of a community. The greater community is beginning to notice this and ask questions. And many people are beginning to say, gosh, I didn't know there was such a thing as a church that actually believed and taught the golden rule, which is kind of funny to me, but to say that there's actually one that really does strive to live that. The May issue of Western North Carolina Women's Magazine did a beautiful two-page write-up about this, and I want to share just a little bit about what is being shared with the greater community and what is being said. They said, Our Love is Power Summit will be a full day of music, speakers, and practical actions resulting in inspiration, motivation, and collaboration, affirming and honoring the common spirit in all that will build bridges, connections, and partnerships to ignite inspired love in action. They said, according to Reverend Darlene Strickland, we are here to be the presence we wish to see. We are here to gather community around a common cause and higher purpose. Love connects us through our common spirit and emboldens us to actively live as a beloved community. Love unites us in peace, compassion, generosity, and respect for the sanctity of humanity, Mother Earth, and all creation. Our love is power, and empowered love is greater than any authority or influence acting in service of prejudice, greed, divisiveness, hatred, or violence. I mean, wouldn't you say our world needs empowered love, that we're all being called to show up as this? And then it goes on, and they have listed our pledge that says, I stand as an ambassador, advocate, and activist for the sanctity of life. And it talks about I commit and I stand up. You have a little card in your bulletins. We have plenty of those cards that share that. And it's a very powerful statement of individuality and a personal commitment of I stand up and I make this commitment. But what I want to talk about today is, in Unity we place a lot of emphasis on inward reflection, of taking personal accountability. We say that there's not a savior out there that's going to do it for us. It's about connecting and showing up ourselves. And so there's a lot of emphasis placed on the individual, on personal accountability and responsibility. And I think that's needed, and I think it's a good thing. And I also think that perhaps a new thought is being called to also expand and place equal emphasis on the community. That this I is really only as strong as the we. And hopefully that the individuals are coming together to create something that is very unique. And so today we're going to talk about that, of what it means to live in community, to be a part of community. As individuals, you're probably a part of a lot of different groups or communities. You may live in a particular neighborhood community. You may be a member of some sort of sports association or golf association or a workout community. You may be a part of a yoga community. You may be part of a 12-step community or a mother's group or a women's group, father's group, men's group. There's lots of different groups and communities we can be a part of. And so we're not suggesting that there's only one group, but today what we're talking about is what we create together and how being a part of a spiritual group, how we have a huge opportunity before us. In Buddhism, there's a lot of emphasis placed on the group. As a matter of fact, in Buddhism, it's taught that there are 3 gems to Buddhism, and it's considered the 3 places where refuge is found, that you can find refuge and safety in these 3 places. The first place is that is taught that you can find refuge and support. Number 1 is in the Buddha, so in the enlightened one. The second place that you can have refuge is in the Dharma. The Dharma is the truth or the teaching. But do you know the third place? The Sangha. And the Sangha is a Sanskrit word that means community. That you find refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the Sangha. And this is a Sangha. The Sanskrit translation of the word Sangha, most accurately understood, is really, it's a spiritual community, or it's a community that honors the sacredness of each other, and that is there for the intention of fortifying and upholding and uplifting and creating that space. And so I want to tell you, I am very delighted and proud to be in a Sangha with you. And I hope you are a part and delighted to be a part of this Sangha as well. And one of the things about relationship or about Sangha is it involves relationship. And you know, sometimes we underestimate the power of relationship. Because as an individual, if you live totally isolated, there's only certain things you will experience. There's only so far that you can go by yourself. But it's when you enter into relationship that you really get to learn what you're made of. You really get to learn. And if you are an individual that has never been in any kind of significant or long-term relationship, you're missing something. Because if you go from here to here to here to here, there's something that can only happen if you make that commitment through better for worse. Year after year, day after day, when you feel good, when you don't feel good, of being in a commitment over a period of time to see yourself grow. And that even if that person after 3 or 4 or 13 years still squeezes the toothpaste in the wrong place, you can find it within your heart to continue to love. Or if they have a totally different opinion, you learn. And so we learn in relationship and in community. And so often we tend to be that way sometimes in our spiritual experiences. We go here and there and there, and while there's nothing wrong with that, there's something to be said about making a commitment, being part of a Sangha where you're going to show up, you're going to grow in time, you're going to create that space together where dynamic things can happen. And that's what we're going to explore today, that our love is power. And next week, we're going to look at the difference in power versus force. But today, what it means to really show up together in community. People create and become the community. And then the interesting thing that begins to happen is that the community then creates and becomes the space that holds the people. It's the space that allows us to grow. Community creates the soil for all to grow, discover, and share our gifts. Community supports people in living out their values. You know, one of the reasons that 12-step communities are so important is because it's the commitment and helping support one another in the shared value, the shared goal, to show up time and time again and hold people accountable to what we're trying to accomplish. Community harnesses the power of group effort and group energy, creates a collective wisdom, and a synergy field that transcends the individual parts. I've had people tell me on Sunday, usually it's when people are leaving after we've experienced some time together and really get into this place that in the scripture is referred to as in one accord. You know, when you really get together and begin to join together, I've had folks tell me if it got any better, I'd be levitating. That there's a synergistic experience that happens. And I shared last week, we had an individual with us on Easter that told me last week that something happened to them during the service, and they had been able to find their way to a 12-step group and have been sober ever since. And it's because, yes, I mean, that's powerful, that there's a field of love, a field of healing that transcends the individuals, and yet it takes the individuals in one mind and in one accord, attuned to a common purpose to come together and to create this. And so the community harnesses this and facilitates it. And then the community also shows what's possible. You know, when you're a part of a community, you can see another person perhaps demonstrating something that maybe you don't believe it's possible for you right now, but if they can do it, then maybe you can. And communities, as they come together, can grow and evolve, because any healthy community, just as any healthy individual, must continue to grow and evolve and expand. And I believe as a spiritual community, as a Dharma, we are being called into a new way and a new opportunity to show up into the world. The great anthropologist Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt what a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." That it's through the commitment, it's through groups and communities that come together that world change takes place. That we hold the capability to facilitate a new way of being when we gather in community. And if you think about it, there's a rhythm and sort of a rhyme and a rhythm to life that is a balance between time in solitude and time in community. That we need both of those. If you look at the life of Jesus, a master teacher, the scriptures say that he went apart, or he went away to pray. He went up the mountain to pray. He took time in solitude to pray, but then he also was very intentional about gathering and building community. The same with the Buddha. The Buddha took time away, and he took time in community. And we all need these things. I learned an interesting statistic when I was in seminary that in most ministers out that are Baptist, Pentecostal, sort of the charismatic, most ministers, 80% or more are extroverts. In unity, 80% or more are introverts, that we love and need that time within. And I would be willing to imagine that translates to the congregation. Somebody told me after the first service, they said, "You're an extrovert. You're a Leo and you're on the stage every Sunday. How could you possibly be an extrovert?" Well, or how could you possibly be an introvert? Well, what we mean by introvert is that you recharge, that the way you are nurtured and nourished is to come apart. I have to have that quiet time. I have to have that time of solitude. And every person, you know your balance, but whether you gravitate more one direction or the other, we all need and rely on times of solitude and times of community. There's a powerful story that is told in the Buddhist tradition that really makes this point. And there's a writer that sort of explains it this way. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, "Let him who cannot be alone beware of community. Let him who is not in community beware of being alone. Each by itself has profound pitfalls and perils, yet together there's a balance in one's being. Blessed is he who is alone while in the strength of fellowship, and blessed is he who keeps fellowship while in the strength of being alone." That the two balance each other. He goes on to say, without being in community, peace and compassion become somewhat theoretical. Sentient beings are out there somewhere, and we lose the experience of actually being in relationship with people, of being kind and caring and considerate on a daily basis. It is only in community that we can fully experience and embrace the vulnerabilities of our common humanity. And it is only in community that we can experience the greatness of our common spirit, the great I am, abiding in the essence of every being. That communion and community, communion, those two words are very similar because it's in community that we come to experience true communion. And communion is very much like the beloved, that essentially there is only one beloved, and that is the great I am. It is that essence of all that is pure love to which all of us are directed to give and all of us are directing to receive. So it's in the midst of community. As a matter of fact, Thich Nhat Hanh recently made the provocative statement, very thought-provoking, when he said the next Buddha will be the Sangha. That the community, that it will no longer be an individual, but it will be communities that come together to create such rich ideas and soil and understanding that out of this will be the next wave of evolution as spiritual being. I want to be part of that Sangha, where the next Buddha, the next Christ, so to speak, is born. How many of you want to be part of that Sangha? And I believe anybody that wants to be a part of that is and can be, and that we're just on the threshold of entering into a new way of being and existing and showing up as community. And if you've ever noticed, anytime you're on the threshold of something new, all that currently is comes up and acts up and screams louder and louder. There's this real resistance and to try to stay here. That's why I tell people when they tell me, all hell is breaking through in my life, I say, hang in there, all heaven is going to break loose soon, because there has to be, there's a breaking through for something new to take place. So the story that is told in the Zen or the Buddhist tradition is about an individual, a man, that deeply wanted to experience inner peace and enlightenment. As the story goes, he had a lot of chaos and turmoil in his life. And so he sought out a teacher, and he found a monastery where he wanted to go and live in community with people that were nice, people that were already at peace, so his world would no longer be troubled. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So he sought this out in hopes of finding this and being able to live in this peaceful place. Well, as he was welcomed in, after a few weeks of study and learning to meditate, the Zen master said, it's now time for you to go in solitude. You need to travel up the mountain until you find a little cabin and take your few belongings, and there you are to go and live until you can find for yourself this inner peace. That we can't create it for you, you must find it for yourself. And to sit and to practice the techniques that you have learned and meditate until you discover that inner reservoir, the inner treasure. And so the man had some doubt, but knew that he had no option. So he made the trip up. He began to spend his time and, would sit in meditation. And have you ever sat in meditation and thought, surely a half an hour had gone by, and it was actually only 3 minutes? So he sat and sat and sat, but as the days and the weeks and months went by, it began to happen. Something that he did not even know was possible. He began to connect with that capacity to be aware of his thoughts and his feelings. He began to transcend those and connect with this great I am, this divine, enlightened being within each and every one of us. In unity, we call it the Christ self. He began to connect with this inner essence that is pure bliss, that is never disturbed, that is never in a state of lack. And so in times of meditation, he would connect with this blissful sense of being. And he was able to do it long enough and hold it long enough that he thought, I've finally got this. I'm going to go back and tell them that I have it, I've got it. So one morning he gathered his things and he started back up the mountain. It's quite a trip. The sun began to rise. It gets hot. He's getting tired. He's thirsty. And just as he reached, there's a long pass in the road back where there are big rocks, stones on either side. So there's sort of a narrow, just a little narrow pass. And just as he gets to the narrow pass, he sees this big group of people. They've got donkeys. They've got lots of children. They've got older people. They've got a whole lot of people and a whole lot of things and a whole lot of noise trying to slowly get through that pass. And so he walks behind them and I'll just breathe. I'll be peaceful. I have this sense of inner bliss. But they keep talking and they're loud and they're not noticing that he's behind. And so after a period of time, he gets really irritated and he begins to just kind of try to push his way through so he can hurry up. And as he's pushing his way through, he says, you people are so inconsiderate. Oh, Lord. He turns around and heads back up to the mountain, realizing he's already lost it. He's just totally frustrated, totally angry, absolutely not in touch with that inner peace. And so he's heading back up the mountain again, when almost out of nowhere, there appears his Zen master right in front of him. And the Zen master is just radiant and sees him and gives him a big hug. And the man just hangs his head and he said, I thought I was coming back. I was doing so great by myself, but as people, now I got to go back. I'm mad again. And the Zen master said, well, who told you you were upset? Who pointed out when you lost that inner peace? And the man said, well, nobody had to tell me. I noticed it. Nobody had to point it out. I felt it. I was aware. And the Zen master clapped. And the man looked puzzled. And he said, you are ready to come back into the Sangha. And the man looked puzzled. And what the Zen master told him, he said, in solitude, you develop awareness. In community, you practice awareness. In solitude, you touch inner peace. In community, you strive to keep inner peace. In solitude, you discover the wellspring, the heaven, the kingdom within. In community, you demonstrate it, you bring it forth. He said, in solitude, you connect. You live within the connection. In community, you live out the connection. Isn't that beautiful? That's the balance. That's what we all need. And so it's in community. And here where we have the practices of prayer, of self-reflection, of accountability, of learning to pay attention of when our buttons are pressed, when we lose it, when we go off track, to notice that. And you know, the majority of the world, when they notice that, they make somebody else the matter with them. Have you noticed there's a lot of that going around? Now, I'm sure none of you do that, but there's a lot of people that their whole life is about making somebody the matter with them. And life will continue to make somebody the matter with us until we have to take accountability and responsibility for how we feel and how we show up. That is not saying that we're to tolerate any kind of behavior or any kind of action, but we're to make wise, loving choices. And so we're called together to create community. We're called to create a place where we can live out the things that it is that we discover and find this inner treasure. That's what Jesus meant when he said, as it is in heaven, so shall it be on earth. I spent a lot of my life in a church waiting for Jesus to come and me to be raptured away. I don't think it's going to happen. I really truly believe that we are the ones that are going to have to create heaven in the midst of all hell breaking loose. And it has to take place within here, but we have to go. What we're being called is to go the distance. We can't stop. And as a New Thought community, I think we're really being stretched a bit to say, make a commitment as a community. Create something. Let your light shine, because people need a safe place to come in, to study, to explore, to find the limitations of their being, to fall down and then to be picked up, to be able to genuinely discover who you are in the presence of love. Do you want to be a part of a community like that? Not just a receiver, but a creator. I want to create that, and I want to be a part of that. Well, there are 5 quick things I'd like to share that come from nature, how nature teaches us to do this. I believe that nature, the nature of nature is to evolve. It's to reveal its potential. And so nature should be able, I believe, nature should reflect back to us almost the answer to any solution we're seeking, because we're part of it. And so if we want to look, how do we learn about community? Let's look at geese. Let's look at lessons that can be found in the life and through the lives of a goose or a flock of geese working together. The first spiritual lesson that comes from geese is, number 1, is about a common purpose and a destination. Geese form this beautiful V. Airplanes are designed after that. They form this beautiful V in formation when they migrate, and the reason they migrate is because they need resources. They go from the cold to the warmer and then back because they need to be able to find resources to survive. And so they're on this common path, this common journey. Well, as a human spirit being, we also share the same purpose, the same journey. I think Ram Dass said it most beautifully when he said, "We're walking each other home." We're walking each other home. And that's a twofold meaning. It means that between this experience that we know as birth and death, we're walking each other home. And we are also walking each other home in the discovery of who we are at the depth of our being, that we're walking each other home. We share that in common. So we have that common purpose. We're already on a common journey, and so let's be mindful about it. The second thing, there's the common purpose and the destination. The second thing that we learn from geese is there's a synergy field of lifting power. That when we come together, there's a maximization, a synergizing that takes place with power and potential. This is what scientists say. When geese fly together, each goose provides additional lift and reduces air resistance for the goose flying behind it. When a goose drops out of the V formation, it quickly discovers that it requires a great deal more energy to fly. Consequently, it will quickly return to the formation to take advantage of the lifting power that comes from flying together. Scientists estimate the whole flock can fly about 70% further using the same amount of energy if they flew alone. 70%. That is incredible to have your energy. If our energy were magnified by 70%, we'd be little children again. We could keep up with our children. But could you imagine that when we come together, there's a synergistic field that creates that if it's 70% with geese, who knows how powerful it may be here. But it's a palpable something that happens. Last week, how many of you were here when Odell was here? Just an amazing singer and just a deeply spiritual. Robert George, our percussionist, has a studio, and he had recorded Odell with a gospel choir and told me about him, and so we invited him, and he came in. Well, I didn't realize it until last Sunday morning when he got here with his wife. He's also a Baptist minister. And I have to admit, when I first heard he was a Baptist minister, I got a little nervous for him, because I thought, oh no, will he be comfortable? I hope he's comfortable, and I sure hope he doesn't walk out after first service, because what are we going to do second service? All that's going on. Monday, this is what he wrote to me. Good morning, Reverend Darlene. Thank you and all the members of Unity Church so very much for warmly welcoming us into your service on Sunday. My wife and I greatly enjoyed both services. From the time we entered the church until the time we left, we felt the love, ! We were greatly, greatly encouraged and blessed by your message. Thank you so much for all that you do. We look forward to visiting again soon. Isn't that powerful? Yeah. We've invited him to come to the summit. He has another commitment in Mocksville, but we're trying to find a way to still get him here for at least part of it. But then he followed up again on Thursday with a text and said it was Wednesday or Thursday. He said, I just want to tell you, my wife and I are still reflecting and very hopeful about what's going on in that community. That touched me deeply. And I want you to know that someone that came in as an outsider could feel the palpable love, so much so that they were talking about it into the week. That's the field that gets created when people commit to showing up and to sharing their gifts. So that's the second thing. There's a synergy field. There's a lifting power that transcends us as individuals. The third is what the geese teach us is to fully participate. The goose that is out leading, it takes the most energy to be out front. And so there's only a certain amount of time that the one can do this. And as they get tired, they will go all the way to the back where the wind resistance is the least so they can rest. And so they all rotate, leading and following. They learn that they fully participate. And you see, that's the beautiful thing here, is to fully participate. There's a story some of you have probably heard. It says, there's a little story about 4 people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure somebody would do it. Anybody could, but nobody did. Somebody got angry about it because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought that anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. I think there's a lesson to be learned from the geese, that we all lead and we all follow. That's part of being in a community. And when you are in a community, throughout the period of your life, you will experience different things in the community. We recently had a baby blessing in the community. We recently had a memorial service in the community. We recently had a wedding in the community. All of those families, those individuals, experience something unique with the community. You, in turn, in relationship with those individuals and those families, experience something. And that's the thing about community, is there's times that we'll need to be in receivership. And that's something for us to learn. And there's times when we're the one that is giving full out. We're giving all we've got. But if we're all fully participating, magic happens. Something very amazing gets created. The fourth thing is that the geese honk at each other. Now, let's explain this. The way one scientist said it, they don't just make noise, they make progress. That what the honking is about is their way of communicating and encouraging one another. So don't honk in a complaining way. The way to be in community is to encourage, to celebrate, to communicate clearly. That's one of the things that we definitely need to be able to live in community, to grow in community. And the fourth is to support and to be supported. This one, I think, touched me the most deeply when I understood this, is that during the formation and the long migration trip, if any one goose gets hurt and needs to drop out, they never go alone. There's always two that go with them. That anytime they go down, three will go down. And if the one is sick, the two will stay with them until they get well. If the one dies, the two will stay with them until they completely die. But they will never abandon just the one. That they will stay with them, and then if they are well again, they'll go back up until they can find and join another flock. That power that nature teaches us to support one another, to be one another. Well, I think there's a wisdom here among us that even far transcends a flock of geese. I think there's something pretty amazing that is getting ready to happen. Richard, would you come forward and would you prepare for the video? I want to show you a video in closing, and I want to point out that what you're going to hear is voices only. This is from a group called Pentatonix, and it's a powerful demonstration of what can be accomplished when a group of people work together. And as you open up to what it means to be a part of a community, to work together, please watch this. Ultimately, that's our Sangha, a human family. And the macrocosm can reflect the microcosm. We have it within us to create that reality that is called heaven on earth right here. And I don't think it's out of our reach. As a matter of fact, I know that it's already here. I'm inviting us to become more deeply committed to Sangha, to being community, to being intentional about what we are creating and the gifts that we have to offer. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes as we enter into a time of meditative prayer. We do imagine what the Master Teacher Jesus called heaven, what has been called nirvana, enlightened living. And we know that we've also been taught that Jesus said, if the kingdom were in the air, the birds would precede you. If it were in the water, the fish would precede you. But the kingdom is within you, and it is without. The kingdom is at hand. Because it's a reality, a way of being. And just as our physical growth and evolution is one builds upon the next, we learn to sit, to walk, to run. There's a sequential development and unfoldment. So it is in our soul and our spirit. That as we open to deeper experiences of love, to deeper experiences of self-reflection, then the ultimate self, the great I am, begins to express through us. Each of us are on our unique place in this journey, but we share something in common. We are human beings, spirit expressing. We share in common the belief that all are an expression of all that is, and therefore all beings are holy and should be regarded as such. We share that this earth is a living being, and all creatures, our sentient creatures, are an expression of all that is and should be held in that regard. We believe and hold in our hearts that there is a way to live in communion, that unity does not mean uniformity, and oneness does not mean sameness, that it is through our uniqueness that our lights shine, that our gifts, our talents work together to create something beautiful. And so we should not let our differences divide us, but let them inform us. And may our hearts be big enough to create and hold space for all. And it doesn't mean that we have to tolerate harmful or hurtful ways or behaviors, but it means that we're now equipped to deal with it as a loving child would be present to as a loving parent would be present to their child. We can correct with love. We can stand for justice and what is right with love. May we be this Sangha. May we more deeply commit to show up, to bring ourselves to this lifting power, and to realize that we are part of what creates this lifting power. May our love and our presence be magnified 70%, 100%, 1,000%. May we be a sanctuary, a true refuge for any heavy heart, a true place to celebrate, to honk with joy as we walk each other home. Hold that feeling of love and belonging in your heart. And feel yourself being held in this field of love and belonging. And as the words say, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I hope someday you will join in, because the world truly already is one. And so we give thanks for this truth. As you open your eyes and look around at this Sangha, I invite you to join in those beautiful words. I hope someday you will join us, but I'm not the only one. You can find me. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one. I invite you to stand up and sing it out. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will live as one. One more time, sing it out. You may say